Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And Dr. Lopkin, before the podcast, you really had some good insights, and I think it's a really good topic about the media landscape, and maybe you can kick off the discussion.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about how the media is hyping COVID-19, hyping Biden's poll numbers. And what we saw, we're now at the end of second quarter, and all three big cable news networks, Fox, CNN, and MSNBC, all reported record ratings. And I think this right there tells us why they're hyping these stories so much. They're after these ratings. They're not after the truth anymore. They just want to grab the viewers.
Well, I think CNN in particular, they've built I think we talked about this a long time ago on our radio show, that they've completely switched their brand image from the neutral arbitrator of the news to almost political hacks.
Yeah, CNN made a number of switches. I remember back in 2016, people were actually referring to them as the Clinton News Network.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
They are actually, even though they swung to the left, they are still closer to the center than MSNBC. And the ratings are reflecting that, because CNN did a lot better than MSNBC did.
That's really interesting, because MSNBC during the Russia investigation was actually neck and neck with Fox.
Right, and the thing is, MSNBC lost a lot of their credibility during that, because they were hyping the fact that Trump was going to be removed from office, that they had absolute proof. The Mueller report,
especially Rachel Maddow.
Right, the Mueller report was going to say with no doubt that Trump was guilty of colluding with the Russians, and the Mueller report said no such thing. People left MSNBC because they went, okay, you didn't know what you were talking about. You have no real credibility. And now basically their core audience is the far left, who they won't go anywhere because nobody else is reporting anything that the far left wants to really hear. But what it says is the fact that Fox is doing that much better says that,
you're drawing the conclusion that the ratings for TV does have a correlation to the poll numbers or Trump and Biden's popularity.
Absolutely. Because Trump supporters are watching Fox. They're not watching CNN, so much. They might turn on, every once in a while. They're certainly not watching MSNBC. Biden supporters, by the same token, they're not watching Fox. They're probably sticking around with MSNBC. They're most likely watching CNN. But these ratings show that mainstream America is not splitting the way these polls are calling it.
But let me just talk about just a little bit of a diversion in terms of Trump's poll numbers. Do you agree that his handling of the coronavirus initially helped him, but he really did kind of blow that, plus the riots?
Oh, absolutely. The riots certainly didn't help him, but no, his handling of coronavirus was terrible. He did not handle it well at all. And
he started out well, and then he unraveled.
Yes.
Interesting.
But while that's certainly helping Biden in the polls, you still have the basic problem with these polls that they haven't changed their methodology in 4 years. And this is not an assumption. I've actually spoken to a lot of these places, Quinnipiac University, that do these polls. And they've told me point blank, no, it's the same methodology. They haven't changed anything. Well, that methodology does not reach Trump supporters. Trump supporters don't respond to these surveys. And quite frankly, even those that do, there is such pressure by the media. Oh, you can't be a Trump supporter. Oh, it's terrible. That a lot of them won't say to the polling companies that they're going to vote for Trump, but they will when it comes to walking into the polling booth.
No, and I think that's a real phenomenon that is fascinating to me, and I've seen this. It's almost, well, not almost, it is socially non-appropriate for people to say, I like Trump. And I think people get spooked, even though it's a phone survey, they basically say, no, I'm voting for Biden. Do you agree there's a factor of that?
Oh, there's absolutely a factor of that. And there's also a factor of how these questions are asked. There was one recent poll that said the most important issue, according to their survey for the presidential election, is racial equality. Now, here's the thing. When people go into the polling booth, they're thinking, well, what's best for me?
But
if a poll asks you, well, how important is racial equality? Well, unless you're an absolute racist, you're going to say, oh, well, that's very important.
Of course, but when you're behind the curtain, so to speak, figuratively, it may have very little bearing at all.
Right. You're looking at it as, is racial equality an important issue? Of course it's important. It's an important issue. When a poll asks you that, you're going to tell them, of course it's an important issue. But when you're deciding who you are going to vote for, you're looking for who is going to do the best job for me.
I agree.
If you have not been discriminated against, or if you've been discriminated against for reasons that have nothing to do with race, for example, religion, or a great example is the LGBT community, who they've had to deal with discrimination, but it was a Trump Supreme Court that held that they had rights not to be discriminated against. So you're looking at all of these things. The polls make it very simplistic. And I don't think they're actually showing what mainstream America is really looking at, especially the center of the country.
I would agree. Last point before we wrap this Carnivore Bite edition up. Last thing I just want your insights in. One thing I think that Trump has in terms of something to really watch out for is the spikes in corona. That could really be a real major issue.
It could be, but that's also a story that the media is pushing. There have actually been studies that have shown a direct correlation with the number of new corona cases to the increase in testing. And while there's certainly, if you're being stupid and you're going out without a mask and you're not obeying social distancing, yes, you can be spreading it. A percentage of people who have been tested that are developing coronavirus is actually dropping, even in these areas where they're showing spikes. So they're telling you about the numbers of people, but the numbers of people don't actually tell you the real story.
Interesting. So we'll have to pick that up for next week, and we're not doing our traditional Friday Carnivore Radio podcasts in honor of the July 4th weekend, correct?
Absolutely. And to all of our listeners, we hope you have a fantastic Independence Day weekend. Have fun, but remember to stay safe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lopkin, and thank you for our listeners. We'll be back next Wednesday. Take care.
See you then.
You've been listening to Carnivore Bites, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us every week on carnivoreradio.com xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast Store, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.